All right, good afternoon. So my name is Jay Pandit. My partners, Kyle Miller and Sean Collin, we are Bold Diagnostics, and we're a Northwestern University startup that's developed the Bold Bands. This is a wearable blood pressure monitoring system that provides physicians with continuous, accurate blood pressure trends. It'll be a disruptive technology for blood pressure monitoring. So I'd like to start off by telling you about our clinical need. This is Sam. Sam is a patient that we met when we were doing clinical observations in the hospital. Like 1 million Americans today, he has chronic kidney disease. He gets dialysis 3 times a week and has been on the kidney transplant list for 3 years. Last year, he got his kidney transplant, but just 3 months later, his kidney failed. I'd like to point out that every single kidney transplant is a $250,000 investment by the United States healthcare system, and every year, half of them fail. We had to find out why. So we spoke to some transplant surgeons like Dr. Anton Scaro here, and he told us that the #1 cause for these failed kidney transplants was elevated blood pressure. So we just assumed that these patients were just sick, and so it was an inherent problem. But we had to test that assumption. So we went into the clinic and spoke to transplant nephrologists like Dr. George Bachers from the University of Chicago. These are the doctors that take care of the patients after they get their transplant. And he pointed out something very interesting. He said that it was not an inherent medical issue. It was actually a problem of inadequate tools for blood pressure monitoring. A preventable problem. A preventable problem that caused half of kidney transplants to fail every year. We couldn't believe this. We had to confirm it. We went into the clinic and saw 10 other cardiologists, 5 more nephrologists, and 5 other primary care physicians. These are all doctors that manage blood pressure. And it turned out to be true. Physicians were using this 150-year-old technology that provided them with discrete, inaccurate, intermittent, and infrequent measurements. Let me give you an example. The graph on the left side is my blood pressures every hour over 24 hours. And depending on what time I go into the clinic, I could be told I'm a very healthy individual, or I could be told that I needed blood pressure medicines. It was not reliable. We knew that we had hit a very compelling clinical need. And this was essential because we were a health tech company, and we knew that 90% of the health tech businesses fail because they're not addressing a pain point. Our pain point and our value proposition was undeniable. So we developed the Bold Bands. This is a blood pressure monitoring system that the patient can wear. It provides the physician with accurate, continuous, unobtrusive measurements in a low-cost fashion so that physicians can monitor their high-risk patients frequently. Again, like I said, our value proposition was undeniable. The physicians loved it, but they weren't the only ones. Professional societies also came out and told us that this is something that would be disrupted. We have letters of endorsement from the American Medical Association, the American Heart Association, and the United States Preventive Services Task Force, which has all said that blood pressure monitoring needs a new player, and this is it. All these activities confirmed that we were addressing a very significant problem. Physicians wanted to get rid of the guesswork in blood pressure management, and we had created a tool that provided them with just that.
Okay, so we've identified a clinical need, and we also have a strong value proposition. So we're faced with our first real challenge. It's basically, could we actually develop a cuffless blood pressure monitor? So we did an ideation and brainstorming session, started talking to some cardiologists and physiologists and other biomedical engineers, and we did a bunch of benchtop prototyping. So we developed our first working prototype. So this led us to develop our patent-pending concept of differential pulse arrival time. So the theory basically states that when your heart contracts, it creates a pressure pulse wave. And that pulse wave is going to arrive at your right hand first and then your left hand because of inherent anatomical delay caused by the heart. And the second hypothesis with that is that the delay is actually going to be a predictor of your blood pressure. And so to test that, we developed a first prototype. So this is a pair of optical sensors that measure the pulse arrival times at your wrist, and it has a wireless module that sends that data to a smart device for processing and then final report generation. And so with this prototype, we did our first killer experiment. So we wanted to show that DPAT actually correlated to changes in your blood pressure. And so we kept it pretty lean and simple, and our initial killer experiment was basically a cold pressor test where you put the subject's legs into a bucket of cold water, which causes a spike in your blood pressure. And so this is a subset of that clinical data. It does 2 things. First, it shows that there is a difference in pulse arrival times, as shown in the representative waveforms on the right. And then secondly, that DPAT actually correlates to changes in blood pressure. So you can see on the bottom the black graph. This is at rest, a continuous DPAT measurement. And then as soon as you put the patient's legs in the cold water, the blood pressure spikes up, and the DPAT shown in red correlates significantly to that change in blood pressure. So now that we have a working prototype and some proof of concept clinical data, we started focusing on developing our minimal viable product, and specifically we were looking at the form factors. And so we started out developing this disposable patch, thinking that that would be convenient for the patients. But then we quickly found out that talking to these end users and some investors that a traditional wearable would be a better fit and provide you with longer-term monitoring capabilities. So we pivoted, and that's where we developed our final minimal viable product here, the Bold bands that we showed earlier. Now, I've also done a number of key activities outside of product development. So for example, we've conducted a comprehensive, non-biased prior art search, received a positive patentability opinion that's led us to move forward with a provisional filing that protects the mechanism of differential pulse arrival time, as well as a critical calibration technique. From there, I'd like to point out that the founders of Bold are actually the inventors of the technology, and then we've executed an option agreement with Northwestern University for the exclusive rights to this technology. So in addition to that, we've also established a number of key relationships with some partners, like Edge One Medical, for example. This is a regulatory consulting firm that's helping us with our regulatory strategy, as well as schedule a pre-510K submission meeting with the FDA. We're also working with Optimal Design, a product development firm, as well as Herbst Product and Industrial Design firm, to finalize our product development and move technology forward. So we understand that to contract with all these people, we need additional $565,000 in seed financing, but we're going to supplement that with some non-dilutive sources of funding, and that's why we submitted a National Science Foundation SBIR Phase 1 grant last year that's currently under review now. And so by completing these major milestones, we position ourselves to be competitive in this marketplace.
So you learned about our pain point and our solution, but we also had to learn as a team how to be a viable business. So what we did is we did research at Northwestern, and we figured out that the overall market for uncontrolled high blood pressure was 38 million patients. And with the current reimbursement structure in place, that placed the market at $2.9 billion. Now we made this mistake up front. We thought we could just slap this on every patient with uncontrolled hypertension. But we went out and we did interviews with major players in the market, like Abbott and Baxter. And they told us, back up, just focus and dominate a target market. So that's why we went after kidney transplants. And as you learn, those patients have the most to lose, and it would give us the earliest adoption and utilization before we expand to the other markets. Now, we went out and we interviewed 50 doctors that manage high blood pressure, and it only cost us a few phone calls and some bus tickets downtown to Northwestern. They all loved our tech, and they couldn't wait to get it on patients. But what we learned is that they're actually being influenced by those key societies, like the AMA and AHA, because they actually write the guidelines. Now, fortunately, the current guidelines are calling for longer-term monitoring, so that benefits Bold. Now, the other thing is we're going into a clinical trial, and so that's going to help establish customer relationships for the Bold bands. Another thing is we're developing a direct sales force, and for future relationships, that's going to be critical for our growth. Now, we actually assumed that all these doctors we were talking to were our target customers. Turns out we were wrong. They don't make the buying, purchasing decisions in the hospitals. It's actually value analysis committees. What these are very dedicated teams to both doctors and administrators, and they come together to actually evaluate new technology at hospitals. So by focusing on these VACs, we're gonna get the biggest market penetration. For the Bold bands, we need the right channels. Initially, we thought we could just get away with a distributor. But this is an innovative, disruptive technology, and it requires a missionary aspect with education up front. So what we learned through our interviews is that we need a combination of both a direct sales force to get out there and educate, and a distributor through Cardinal Health or McKesson. And what that's going to do is help with our pipeline as we get our product out. Now, we also did our homework. We figured out that the Bold bands are going to cost around $12 to make. By selling those at $50, it gives us a profit margin around 80%. Now, there's other things in our cost structure that we have to factor in, like distribution fees, licensing fees, and key hires like a direct sales force. Those are all key things that we're factoring in as we plan for a product launch by 2018. Now, how do we make money though? That's the real thing you guys want to know. Initially up front, we thought that our patients were going to have to buy this online through our website or get it through a major retailer. But we went and had conversations with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and we also talked to Blue Cross Blue Shield. And what they told us is that the Bold bands could actually be reimbursed through an existing CPT code for ambulatory monitoring. So each time a doctor prescribes this device, they can get reimbursed $75 on up to $250. So it's a win-win for the doctors and Bold with a recurring revenue stream. The Canvas has been essential for our team's success. It's helped us test key hypotheses along the way and help with pivots. But the major thing that we love about the Canvas is that it's a key for
What time is
innovators.
that?
So we hope that you share our bold vision, and welcome to the future of blood pressure monitoring. Thank you.
Questions? Yes.
Yeah, I heard on the licensing fee. I didn't hear anything talking. Maybe it's further in your presentation. Didn't have time about intellectual property protection. Who owns the patents? Do you have license agreement where patents registered? What's the life of the patents? I mean, if you're asking for the money, I mean, this is
Sure,
a key
absolutely.
point.
Yeah, so as part of Northwestern University and the invention of the technology, it's actually owned by the university, but through their policy, we've licensed it back to the company. And so currently it's in a provisional patent filing, so we'll convert on that in a couple of months.
Covering what territories?
Like geographic territories. So right now it's still a provisional patent in the US only. We could file a PCT and do international protection, but probably just go straight to utility and convert in other major market areas like Japan and Europe, for example.
So you're getting blood pressure. What are you doing with the data? How are you managing the HIPAA compliance, and what system is that going into? I mean, are you having to do your whole own back end, or where is it going?
Sure, you want to talk about it?
Sure. So absolutely, HIPAA compliance is going to be a big question mark. And in fact, we definitely took that into account when we were doing our regulatory submissions. In the regulatory submissions, it was our strategy was to do a stepwise approach. The initial approach would be to actually keep the data on the patient's side, so the patients would upload it in a patient portal, where we would get over the HIPAA hurdle. And then later on, working with a consultant later, we would have to do an integration into the EMR. It's definitely going to be a hurdle going forward, but we have a stepwise approach going forward. So.
Sorry, I have a follow-on on that. So does the data just live on the device until it's somehow connected, or what does it connect to, and at what stage does it get uploaded?
Yeah, so that's certainly a work in progress. Again, maintaining this kind of lean approach, stepwise approach,
Yeah.
To keep it simple at first.
Yeah.
So right now, it's probably going to be more of a data dump at night, for example.
Okay.
After it records for 12 hours, you'll connect to a smartphone to transfer that data that then gets uploaded to a patient portal.
Okay, so it's not yet using Bluetooth or anything like that to send it up live.
The current prototype is Bluetooth live transmission, yes.
Okay.
To smartphone, yeah.
It is.
It is right now.
Okay.
Smartphone, but not to a database beyond.
Right.
Not beyond that. I
Yeah.
see what you're saying.
The anticipated time on the market and how much it will cost you to get there?
Yeah, so bringing up that slide, we actually have a milestone map. So currently right now, we're projecting a product launch in 2018. We think it's going to cost around $500,000 to get us there, based on a rough order of magnitude from a product design firm that we're working with, Optimal Design. That's also taking into consideration those IP filings that you mentioned with the PCT, US utility conversion, and also a regulatory submission through the FDA for
I want
510K.
to say 500,000 would be enough.
Well, that's going to get us to 2018, and then, or 2017, sorry, and then we're going to need a Series A of 2 million, because we're going to have to factor in key hires. There's going to be distribution fees, there's going to be manufacturing costs, and that's going to help us ramp up and get ready to actually enter the market. And then we're actually projecting that we'd have profitability by 2021. And that's our break-even point.
So I'm trying to understand, if you're a diagnostics company, or you're a medical device company, or you are a helper to physicians company, or you a data collecting company. So if you were to take one sentence to say, which industry are you in?
Sure. At this point, I think we would want to say that we are a diagnostics company. And the reason I say that is the ultimate goal really is to capture that consumer market. But I think that our step, we have a very strategic way to get there, and that's initially with clinical validation. So when you get the clinical validation, people are going to group you up as a medical device company up front. And we're taking all those steps to hit the check marks so that when we have a clinically validated product, we can enter that market as competitive, be the consumer market. But I think at the moment, I think we'll call ourselves a diagnostics company.
Because you cannot do all of the stuff you said you're going to do, really. It's like enough for 3 companies together. And also, right now you're part of the university. When you form your own company, and all you're saying that you're licensing from somebody, that's not good enough to really build the company by itself. Do you have a plan at some point to become independent?
Sure, so 2 points to that. First of all, to clarify, we are a formed company outside of the university. We've licensed the technology back from the university, though. And then to the second point about the work required to bring it to market, we fully understand there's some significant hurdles to bring it to market. But as Jay mentioned earlier, the final play, the largest market opportunity is in consumer applications. And so as we reach clinical validation, I think a successful exit would probably be acquisition by a consumer player like Nike or Apple or something for that. So bringing it to market is going to be quite a substantial hurdle. And so we would look for a strategic acquisition. So,
How much is your royalty?
sorry?
How much is your royalty?
So we're still negotiating the option agreement. So I would anticipate a royalty rate of about 4%.
Who is,
Sorry. At the end, there was one comment about a recurring revenue stream, but I didn't understand where that was coming from.
Okay, so the bands would be covered under a CPT code for ambulatory monitoring.
Okay.
So through CMS, which is Medicare and Medicaid, that reimburses $75. But your third-party payers, like Blue Cross Blue Shield, they reimburse up to $250.
Okay.
So that's how the doctor is going to get reimbursed to actually prescribe the bands.
But that's a one-time payment on the set of bands, correct? It's not
Exactly.
truly recurring like a subscription or monthly or something like that.
Yeah, it's just a recurring revenue stream is the way we see it because they continue
Okay.
to prescribe the bands.
Because they're
And then-
prescribing.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then,
It's a
and then we're
sales tax.
charging $50, cost of goods sold $12.
who is monitoring the data? You collect all the data, but you need to have somebody on the other end, right? You're going to have an automatic, like you must take your medicine, or?
Yeah, so currently, as it is, there are no established standards. As somebody comes into the clinic, the physician may say, okay, fine, go buy one of those monitors in Walgreens, write your data down on a piece of paper and bring it back. There's no repository. From our standpoint, at this point, what we're doing is we have an IRB approval, so institutional review board approval, to collect this data so that we can do back-end analytics and figure out exactly if there are other predictors as well for blood pressure. So for now, we are prepared to do the clinical trial validation of the data. As we go forward, I think again we'll be looking at a strategic partner to help us with that.
Can you go back to the slide on the team? I
Yeah.
want to see who is the doctor on your team.
Yeah, the very first one. It's us.
So it's two biomedical engineers, myself and Andrew, and then a cardiologist and a surgeon.
Yeah. And we're all part of a biodesign fellowship, and that's where the program, the company came.
When you were talking about size of the market, you said you were looking at $2.9 billion, and then you decided to go to the segment. How big is segment in dollar value?
Yeah, it's definitely a smaller segment. So there's currently around 100 to 150,000 patients with kidney transplants. So it's one of the smaller segments, but because they have the most to lose whenever they actually reject their kidney transplants, we heard from our stakeholders that this was the one that would give us immediate revenue, early adoption, and utilization.
Can you give me in dollars amount and percentage from overall market?
For kidney transplant money?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's around $10 to $15 million. It's a very small market, and we know that, but it's the key to the entry into this market so that we can actually establish ourselves. We looked at a number of things. We looked at pregnancy and hypertension. We looked at drug-resistant hypertension. But this was the one that made the most sense.
So $10-15 million per year in a top sale, right?
Yes.
In the United States.
Yeah.
In the U.S. alone, yes.
And you didn't look outside the United States.
We wanted to focus on the U.S. first. The target market entry.
The wearable medical diagnostic field is about to explode. Can you talk? Yeah, okay, fair.
That was
Okay,
my
yeah, fair enough,
question.
right. So can you speak to the competitive aspect and focus it on the blood pressure competitors?
Yeah, sure. You want to get into slide of the three things. So, initially the competitors are going to be companies like Withings, the folks that are making a fancier blood pressure cuff.
Okay.
But we know that that's still a problem.
Okay.
If you move into the space of cuffless blood pressure monitoring, there are a few players that have products in the pipeline, but there's nothing on the market yet. As you say, it's a very hot market.
Mhm.
And our goal is if we get the clinical validation data, which we have very positive signs for,
Mhm.
it'll be very easy to get acquired to get into the market, maybe not first, maybe second. So,
Are they tackling the technical challenge, meaning the patentable piece of the challenge, differently?
so one, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So pull it up. This is the current standard of cuffless-based blood pressure monitoring. It's called pulse transit time. It's a different approach to it and has some underlying assumptions that decrease its accuracy and its usability. I can go into more detail if you'd like.
No, that's all right.
Yeah.
I just want to know that your approach is unique
Absolutely.
compared to the ones that are
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going back to size of the market. If you come to professional investors and they said everything is great, technology is wonderful, I mean, you have a great team, all there, I mean, everything is perfect, but the market is too small. I don't know how we get our return. What next step you can take?
So, we're focusing on a target market just because of ease of entrance and adoption in that market area. But managing hypertension and a cuffless blood pressure monitor has a number of different applications. And so, depending on the type of investor or whatnot, you could go into a dozen different applications that have billion-dollar market potential. So, the idea of focusing on a target is simply limited resources, time to market, that kind of thing.